Welcome to Just a Few More Minutes podcast, where three veterans of the animation and video game industry talk about exactly that, animation and video games. I'm one of your hosts. I'm a feature film animator named Jeff Gabor, and alongside me always is Pete Paquette.
Hello, hello.
Hi, Pete. And Michael Berardini is not joining us tonight because this is another Jeffro episode. We got Jeff Paquette joining us again.
Hey.
Hi, Jeff.
Hi, Jeff.
But we also got someone even more special than Jeff.
Jeez, I'm very special.
We got the illustrious Bill Gardner joining us on the podcast tonight.
Hey. How's it going?
Hey, Bill.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, Bill, thanks for coming on, man. I mean, like, Bill's a dear friend of mine, and I've been trying to get him on here for a long time, and then we disbanded for a little bit, and I was kind of sad, and then I was like, okay, we got to get Bill on here, goddammit.
The stars have aligned.
Yeah.
I'm stoked.
It only took a pandemic for all of us to get together. I'm just kidding.
It's weird how that has a way of clarifying things and freeing up schedules and things like that, right?
Yeah, right.
As a way of pushing us apart and bringing us together.
There you go, right?
So, Bill, why don't you give yourself just a quick rundown to the audience that may not know who you are, but why they should know you?
Well, they should not know me. I'll start off with that. But I am, I don't know what kind of level nerd, but I'm pretty high level nerd. But yeah, like Pete and Jeff, I've been playing games for my whole life, and at this point, I don't know, years go by. But I started at Irrational Games in 2002, 2003. I don't know, somewhere around there. Some point, I don't know, a millennium ago.
Wow.
And it worked on SWAT and Bioshock and Bioshock Infinite, and had my hands in everything from marketing to lead level designer, design director, you name it. And after Irrational sort of ran its course, I started my own company, the Deep End Games. We released a game called Perception, which is it's a sort of narrative thriller where you play as a blind woman. And we released it on every major platform a few years ago. And up to this point, after that, we've been working hard on our next thing, which we'll be announcing hopefully soon. But, Pete's had a gander at it, and he's had some really great insights, and hoping to get some more of his talent on it. But you've been very fortunate to spend my career making video games, and that's my passion.
Yeah, and it shows, man. Like, you have a very strong resume. So, like,
thank you. I've been very lucky. I was I spent a little time in a short stint in Hollywood. I was a film major, and I went to Mostel Lieberman out at Universal Studios right after graduating, and sort of was a little bit of a script gopher for a while.
Oh, wow.
And it was very grateful. It was sort of a friend of a friend kind of thing. And I was working at the Mostel Lieberman was eventually the company that went on and did Terminator 3.
Okay.
But previously they basically had just launched U571. They released that about 3 or 4 months before I had joined. And it was great experience, but we were in the phase of looking for the next big thing, looking for the next script. And so I got to read all the scripts that were coming in and do all kinds of pitching and just get really heavily involved in the story. Sort of vetting process, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely a script gopher, I guess is what you could call me. But I learned a ton about pitching, learned a ton about story. But ultimately, I decided it was time to come home and really take my shot at video games, because that's where my real heart, or where my real passion was.
Yeah.
And obviously, you were able to take a lot of what you learned and apply it to your own game.
Yeah, I mean, I like to think so. We are the experiences we create, the art that we create. I mean, that's obviously a product of our own experiences, right? I think that's we imbue our own worldview on what we create, and so I learned a ton there. And it's not just about the execution, but it's also about I think about the perspective. It's about, it's not just about how you tell a story, but it's about what kind of stories do I want to tell. And so, yeah, like I said, it's I've been very fortunate, but I'm having a great time.
Awesome.
Yeah. I remember I met you at Irrational. Actually, I had come in for some market research testing of Bioshock Infinite, and you were running those sessions.
Absolutely,
so that was fun.
No, a lot of great stuff. I remember that was you came in what 2 or 3 times or more?
2 times, I think. One is in a group and one as a solo.
Yeah, huge help. I mean, that stuff goes a long way. I think that the audience doesn't necessarily realize how important that stuff is, how crucial it is to making a better game, to get the kind of early feedback and get the insights and what's working and what's not and what's resonating. And yeah, you get a lot of great feedback. So that stuff's invaluable.
Yeah, definitely. And I was glad that you were able to make that happen, Bill, for Jeff. That was awesome.
Heck yeah.
I have a bunch of questions for you, obviously. Not
sure.
Pretty broad stroke questions. Nothing too general, nothing too specific. But
we'll fire away.
Yeah. So what, in all of your experience, can you give like a rough timeline? Besides, like once you got into games, was it were you got right into Irrational right away, or did you? Was there any in between points there?
That's great. Yeah, totally. So at the very beginning, so I was at Mostar Lieberman, and a great experience. But ultimately, I decided to go into film because that was honestly a bit of a safe bet for me. Like growing up, my parents owned a video store, one of the first video stores in Massachusetts, actually, and so I watched. I watched everything. You know, any movie I wanted to watch, they'd bring home, and so it was amazing. I learned. I've seen every freaking movie you can imagine, pre 1995. I'd say. I've seen it all.
Wow.
Yeah, very lucky. But ultimately, video games. When I was about 10 years old, I was sending in ideas to Nintendo. I was writing up these quote unquote design docs to Nintendo, being like, "Hey, you guys should totally do a Metroid 2, and here's a map, and here's all the creatures and the weapons and this sort of thing." And actually, the first game I sent in the first design doc I sent in was for Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. This is before the game eventually released, but prior to it releasing, I was like, this would make an awesome game. I was really into Indiana Jones, and I skipped Raiders of the Lost Ark, and I was like, hey, Indiana Jones, Temple of Doom, it's a much better game. And I sent in all this documentation, and it's like, I don't know, probably 10, 15 pages of drawings and write-ups, and it was a 10-year-old kid, so it was trash. But I sent it, and they were kind enough. I sent it into I think, the Nintendo Fun Club, of all places, and they were kind enough to respond, but it was very legalese. Right, it was all like, hey, I went by BG at the time. It's like, hey, BG, it's we got your stuff. It was really cool. We'd love to make this game. This game, and in fact, there's a company called Mindscape that is actually making it right now. You should contact them for more details. And I was like, oh my god, they love my idea. What they were really saying is that there's this other company that's making this game coincidentally. So I contacted them. And I was like, "Hey, do you know who I didn't? I was as close to it. Do you know who I am? Moment as you can get." And they were like, they didn't respond. They were like, "Okay, just take this kid's letter and throw it in the trash." But Nintendo responded, and I for years I thought that was them saying like, "We love your idea and we're going to make it a reality."
Yeah. Anyway, that's really cool, man.
Yeah, and I still have the letter. I'll have to share it at some point, but. From that gave me the motivation to go and continue to dig in and like learn more about game design. And I kept sending in letters and ideas, and their legalese changed quite a bit. In the pursuing letters, it was like, oh, just so you know, we can't take any of your ideas, unsolicited ideas, or blah, 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 all this whole thing. And wow. So, but I really dug into games. I was always like, when you talk about people being passionate about games, like. Being a Nintendo kid, I was the eye of the storm, where everyone was, the world of Nintendo. You go into Toys R Us, and half the store was that giant world of Nintendo section. Yeah, and
that was great. I can remember the smell.
Right. Oh, really? Wow, I don't remember that. What did it smell like?
It smelled kind of like a new rubbery plastic.
Huh. I bet if I smelled it, it would come back.
Yeah.
That's awesome. But I was the kind of kid where the kids in the playground would be like, oh, does anyone know how to do this? And everyone would just kind of part. They'd step back, and I would like emerge, and there'd be some dust, some tumbleweed roll by, and I'd be like, I know how to get you past that level. And so I'd go to friends' houses with like a box of games, and I'd show up and I would do like mini focus tests and watch people play and be like, hey, so what happened here? Like what, like really examining. Yeah, a complete nerd. I warned you guys. Anyhow,
dude, that's awesome, man.
So that carried on all the way through college, and super passionate. I started writing reviews for video games in the Berkeley Beacon, the college newspaper, and there's like no game development, no game design programs anywhere. It didn't exist, and in fact, game development was almost entirely a thing that existed in the East, like Japan, right? Because after the explosion of the industry in the 80s, it sort of all went away and went to Japan, went back to Japan. And so I had no idea how to become a game designer. And so I went into my other passion, which was film. And then as I was in college and I started to see, you had companies like Naughty Dog and you had Blizzard and all these amazing companies start to emerge in the West. And I was like, so in LA after I graduated, I'm like, well, this is a thing now and I can't let this get away from me. So I moved back home. And I started my old job at Electronics Boutique, where it just
Electronics Boutique. Oh,
absolutely, man, right? Yeah, and it just so happened that all of the local developers went to this one store. You had people from Papyrus and Stainless Steel and Tilted Mill.
Wow.
You name it. They all went to this one store in Burlington, Mass. And one of them happened to be Ken Levine, the creative director and founder of Irrational Games. And somehow I was able to impress him enough to get a shot a shot at an interview in QA and quality assurance. And so I worked my way up from there. Basically, I applied, and I like to think I knocked that out of the park, but I at least got my foot in the door. And I started working on a game called The Lost, which was Lost. It was a game that was doomed from the start. I can get into the long, sordid details about what happened there, but it was my first game in the industry. And I started off as QA, and as the team started to kind of roll off for a variety of reasons, there was all this opportunity for me to help out in design and production and just like tiny little team. And I saw this opportunity, whereas you had other QA devs on the team who were like, their time would be up. They'd punch their way out and head home, and I would try and find ways to help out. Try it without being creepy about it. I'd go to people and be like, hey, is there anything I can do? I would, notice that bugs would sit around for, weeks at a time. And eventually I'd be like, hey, designer number 3 or whatever, do you mind if I notice you're really busy. Do you mind if I go and fix this for you? It's really simple for me to do. And I'm like, oh my God, yes. Can you please take these off my plate? And so I just looked for those kind of opportunities and was able to work my way into design. And from there, just like I said, lead designer, design director. So a lot of luck, a lot of hard work, but a lot of it was really right place, right time kind of thing,
Cool. Yeah, man, that's awesome. So of all those, this is another question I have. Of all those things you just listed and explained, what part of the process is your favorite?
Oh man, I love it all. I think that the parts that I'm least wild about, because I love pretty much most parts equally, but the parts that I will say that I don't like is the very early production where it's like you've got the ideas, you've got everything documented, you're moving, but you have that sort of glacial pace where you're trying to figure out the process and things are coming online slowly and you can't prove stuff out and stuff comes in and it's not anywhere near where you wanted it to be. And so it's like, okay, well, we're scheduled to move on to this next thing, but this thing that we have right here sucks and we have a level that's busted. And so like, I would say the early production, you've made it out of pre-production. You've started to build out some, you have a beautiful corner, you have a couple of systems online, and you have enough content where it's like, it feels like you should be able to evaluate the vision, but you're so far away and it's so frustrating because you still have it in your head, but people start to be like, hey, this kind of sucks. And like, yeah, it sucks because we're 2 years away and we need this and we need this and this is busted and we need, like, this isn't how I said it was going to be. And so that part can be really frustrating. The very early production where it's like, you know, you're coming off of the high of like, oh my God, we can build anything, to the reality of like, oh, we have to make this stuff. We have to make this stuff work. That's the only part that I'm not that wild about. Okay. And that's the toughest part, I think, because, you know, again, when you're blue skying, anything is possible. Right. When you start to hit a stride, it's like we're moving along now and we kind of get what we're doing. We've jumped over that, made the biggest hurdle there of like, hey, do we even know what we're doing? Yeah. And then obviously the end can be tough because you have to start to chop some pieces off and say, we can't do this. And you're crunching. I know that's a dirty word, but you know, you're busting your butt. That can be tough too, but I still love it all. It's just that very early part of development where you're you know, a milestone or two in that I don't like. Like.
Yeah. So have you learned anything about that process and the time that you've done it that you think helped make it more bearable for something like, let's say, Perception?
Well, I think that the biggest thing that I've learned is a lot of the production methodologies. Oh my God, that sounds so nerdy. That have really taken off in recent years. Just about, I'm sure. Have you guys heard about MVP, the minimum viable product?
No.
Yep.
So that's usually related to software, like, you know, we talk about apps and that sort of thing. But the idea is that, generally speaking, you want to focus on proving out as small ideas as possible to build something that represents what could be a shippable product. You know, and I think that one of the problems you have in early production is that you tend to go really broad and you have so many different systems and so many different features and so many different, models and animations, all these different pieces that they're disparate, don't really connect together, and they're terrible, and they show that, right? So I think one of the keys that I've learned is to try and really make sure you're tightly focused, and to be able to prove stuff out where it's not about getting everything up to shipping quality, but at least getting it to that point where you can say, oh, I see why this is cool. I can see why this is going to be helpful and going to be really like really bring value to the player or to the audience, that whole thing.
So like you're saying, like, make the MVP, like reduce your scope for the MVP?
Yeah, I think that basically what you should be doing is ideally trying to always be focusing on something that you can evaluate within reason. Like, where I'm not talking about getting something to shipping quality, but if it's an animation, if it's a section of if it's a level, you should really focus on, okay, well, we have a gray box of the level, but we're really going to focus on this beautiful corner and really getting that to a point where it's like, I can see that. I can see where this is going to be really cool. And you need to basically continue to seed in these glimmers of hope, these glimmers of why this needs to exist, why this feature or this level or whatever it is needs to be part of this game. I think really what it comes down to is every part of development needs to be about selling both the team, yourself, and eventually the audience. You got to keep yourself honest and say, like, does this need to exist? Is this going to be awesome? And again, that's not about like really finely tuning and polishing stuff, but you need to get it to the point where you can say, yeah, that's going to be great. And I can see that. And I think
so. How does that? Sorry, go ahead.
No. Please go ahead.
I was going to say, so how does that fit into things like feature creeping, or does that fly in the face of feature creeping, or how does that?
Yeah,
fit? I know, like, when you have an idea at the beginning, like, it tends to get huge, right? So how do you manage between, like, hey, we're cutting down scope and or, you know, this thing really needs to be in the game, or we're going to prove this is in the game, this needs to be in the game, but at the same time we don't want to feature creep the hell out of it, you know?
Yeah, totally. I think that's the biggest part, or the most crucial piece of the MVP. And that's just about, first of all, you obviously need to make sure you have someone who's really, really on the ball and watching, not the vision, but making sure that, you know, they're basically making sure that things are happening, making sure that things are you know, really moving according to whatever kind of schedule you've established. And listen, I've never worked on a game that's gone according to plan. The closest one I would say was SWAT 4, which was, we had a very clear template for what the game was, based on the fact that it was basically an evolution of SWAT 3. We were basically going to just like put our own little dark spin on things, bring a lot of narrative meaning to things, and really fix a lot of what we thought were the core problems, quote unquote, with SWAT 3, which were some interface issues and that kind of thing. But SWAT 3 was a great game. It's a great, very clear template. And so it was very easy for us to know where to push and where to basically just kind of toe the line and basically take what worked and run with it. So as long as you have somebody who's watching, making sure you don't continue, because one of the dark side of what I'm talking about here is, you continue to really like gild the lily, really polish stuff that doesn't need to be polished at that stage.
Production hell.
Yeah, absolutely. That I think we've probably all been there, right? Where it's just like, and this is the tricky part, because the opposite end of the spectrum here is you're creating a bunch of content that is basically unusable. Like you have to be some kind of voodoo Imagineer to look at what you have on screen and be like, oh yeah, I can see this is going to work. Versus
right.
somebody who's going to spend months and months and months, like getting something up to near ship quality or ship quality. That's a spectrum, right? And so what I'm saying is you want to be able to say like, okay, what are the crucial pieces of the features or the level or whatever the content we're building here? What are the most important pieces? And you need to be able to get to a point where you say like, okay, I get this. I get why this needs to be part of this game. And I think that's really the best sort of checks and balances you have is that if you're talking about designing on paper, you're going to put all your features out there and be like, okay, here are all the features and let's talk about them. And when you start to get like, well, why do we need this? Sometimes you can talk it through and you'd be like, okay, well, we need this feature because it really helps with the balance of the game. And without this, we're not going to be able to create, some kind of hunger in the player, or to create some sort of like, resource scarcity, or, you basically outline all the features and be able to give everything its day in court. Well, I've gone off on several different tangents here. So.
That's good, man.
Effectively, I think that in a lot of ways, it's really just about establishing a series of checks and balances at every stage of development and making sure, like I said, if it's on paper design, you're basically able to, not everyone's a designer and not everyone's going to be able to understand all of the features that you're talking about, but at the very least, you should be able to talk through them and at least be able to win people over. And if they're like, well, I don't really see this, then I think that's where a good producer would come in and say, okay, well, you have the designers saying it's crucial, you have the creative direction saying it's crucial, art team doesn't really see it, and you weigh these things out and you say, okay, well, we'll put this on a sort of like a priority 2 thing that we'll get to after we get to the most crucial pieces, and so yeah, it's basic prioritization, right? So I think that when it comes to MVP, you just want to make sure that you're holding there's levels of accountability, that you have that grand vision creatively, you have the vision from a production standpoint, and that you have someone who is holding people accountable, both creatively and from a production standpoint. And I think that when you break things down in this fashion, it makes it a lot easier to be able to track your progress, to be able to really evaluate what the things you're creating. And a lot of this stuff is like really boring, Scrum talk, right? But I think when it comes down to it, like different teams are going to have their own variations on this, and I think that's important, is to figure out what's going to work for the particulars of your team. So wow, this got into some really boring production stuff.
No, that's cool. I mean, I love it, but I'm a programmer, so
yes, of course. Yeah, there you go. Yeah,
these guys are. How does? I mean, Pete and Jeff, how do you think that relates to like what have you seen when like film and games? And Pete, I know you've worked in film and games. How would you say that carries over into that animation process?
It definitely relates a lot to early production in film when you're trying to build assets and you don't quite, like, films are always greenlit well before you really know every aspect of the story. And depending on how greenlit it is and how, like, based on a spec script or it's tightly nailed down, it's never tight. Like, I think it's just like you constantly want to have that drive to improve the story, which also means the characters or things are going to get put in, they're going to go out, they're going to leave. So you're constantly trying to, like, what characters need to be there, how developed of a rig it needs, how much this character needs to perform with their face, or what kind of deformations they need to really, because everything is a budget, everything costs something. And one thing that you said, Bill, about like finding those moments, also not just market it to the outside world, or is this going to sell to other people, but you're also trying to motivate your team too. So you're trying to give those like shining moments of like, this is going to be great, and you're motivating the team. So you're often trying a rig or something that's a little bit we're going to do, like, I forget what we call them, like look a picture. So you'll pick one little thing, one little short scene that is not going to be in the movie. It has nothing to do with the end product, but you're gonna give it to you're gonna prove what everything needs to be in that look of picture to say this is the goal, to your team, to the marketing, to everybody. So I feel like it's kind of akin to that.
It makes sense.
And then you got an asshole like me, like, this is bullshit.
But I think that has its has its value as well, because I think that obviously you have to try and find a way to tamp down that kind of panic. But I think that to a certain degree you do need that, because you can't become complacent in development. I think that's one of the biggest dangers, is like you have these sort of canaries in the coal mine, and I think it, like, one of the worst, again, you have accountability, and that's crucial or whatever, but even when you have really solid accountability and leadership with producers and creative direction and that kind of thing, it's very easy to become complacent and to kind of become familiar with stuff and kind of fall in love with, okay, I can kind of make these connections and I can see where this is going to be good, but nobody else can see it, and they can see where how much work it's going to take to get that to ship and to get it to polish quality. And then
you end up getting salty when you're asked to change that particular thing.
Yeah, exactly. So, listen, my whole philosophy is, like, if anyone thinks that they've got it figured out, they're full of shit. Pardon me. I think that really what it comes down to is, like, every project is going to be a complete reinvention. I think that certainly with there are differences between film and difference between games and software, and you name it. But I think particularly with games, listen, when you talk about, like, I always scratch my head when people are like, oh, why can't, it's like, oh, game delays and crunch and all that's a failure of management. And to some degree that's true. But at the same time, listen, we've been building houses for how many hundreds of years, right? And like, the technology hasn't changed all that much. There's been all kinds of new regulations, and there's like things that are going to help out along the way. But ultimately, when it comes down to it, the basic principles remain the same. And you have contractors who are building house after house, and sometimes it's prefabs and this kind of thing. But even they are super late all the time. And now imagine for a second that if you have contractors who are following a process and they're late on their estimates, and they're over budget and they're over time and that kind of thing. Now imagine for a second you add in two ethereal bits. Number one would be, oh, hey, guess what, Mr. Contractor Man? When you enter this house, it needs to be fun. Like, what the hell does that even mean?
Yeah.
Like, that's what a video game is. You have to have these ethereal things of like, oh, it's going to be fun. And then on top of that, oh, when you're building this house, I need you to go ahead and reinvent the entire world of physics. So when you pick up that hammer and swing it, it's not going to behave like a hammer. You have to completely tune the physics of that hammer such that when it hits, it's not going to knock down the entire house. And that, just imagine the cascade effect on every single thing that you do. With those two factors, the fact that every single thing that you do has to be reinvented, and that everything you do needs to be quote unquote fun. Yeah, of course games are going to be delayed. Of course games are going to make people crunch to a degree, or go way over budget or way over time, because even the much more predictable aspects of like really static software development, like updates to, I don't know, Microsoft Excel or something like that. That's a huge undertaking, I'm sure, but you can talk about updates to that, or building an addition or a house or whatever. It's tough to predict, right?
I like to think that honestly, video games is the very tip-top epitome of building art, because it's taking it's been said a million times, but it's taking every single medium there is, combining it all together is just basically what you're talking about, like construction, building, physics, and then fun. But on top of that, the thing that I have to deal with a lot is story. So then you have to add a story on top of that. So it has to be fun and tell a story, and you're judged equally on both at the end of the day when a critic just sees it for the first time. It's so intimidating to put all that together to have a product that is successful.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Cool though. What a cool challenge.
I think that there's. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No. I was just going to say, I think that, when you compare film to games, I think that there's games are about mashing all these different things together. Whereas I think if you look at some film, there's the challenges there are much more about, I think, fidelity, and not necessarily about like, oh, this just look real or whatever, but that believability. Whereas I think that a lot of times games, I think a lot of the sequences that resonate with people, if you compare the sequences that really resonate, I think a lot of times they're kind of Muppets compared to what you would see in a film. And I think it's much more about that connection that you're building. I think it's much more about the, like, I'm controlling this. And I think I'm always much more of a fan of stuff that's going to happen in engine, stuff that's going to happen in the world and in gameplay versus cutscenes. I tend to be a little bit of a snob about cutscenes. But I think that's one of the key differences there. So I think that they both have their unique challenges.
I'm going to go off on a slight tangent and ask you, just we obviously all grew up playing games at the same time. Like when you were like 13, 14, there started to be more developed cutscenes. Did you look forward to them or did you hate them?
Initially, I absolutely looked forward to them. And there was a bit of an evolution here. I think that the clearest, going way back, like when I saw it in games like Ninja Gaiden on the NES, I was like, oh my God, this is like, you can see where this is going to take us. We're gonna be having playable movies, and it's going to be so awesome. And it's like, and then you had Metal Gear Solid. Skip ahead. What was that? Probably like 8 years or so. Skip ahead to Metal Gear Solid. And that was a revolution. It's just the way that they're having the credits roll, and the way that the cutscenes and the quality of the voice acting and the sound and the way all that stuff was integrated. And then a couple more years, and I started to be like, this is a video game. I'm supposed to be interacting. I don't want to sit and watch. First of all, I don't want to watch a cutscene. That stuff has its value, and I love, like in Final Fantasy, when you watch these really gorgeous cutscenes and that kind of thing. But ultimately, I sort of over the years I've become more of I guess a bit of a snob in that I think a lot of ways I look at cutscenes as like kind of a surrender. Sometimes it's impossible to avoid given the scope of things and the amount of story you're trying to get across. But I think in a lot of ways it's a bit of a failing. And this isn't for everything. This doesn't. I don't like to speak in generalities, but games are about interactivity, and I think that you should be able to tell your story in game. And I get that the value of putting taking controller from the player and saying like, you know what, we have a very specific bit of information we need to exposit, and therefore we need to completely wrestle control from the player. But the plus side is we're going to have a really gorgeous cutscene. We have really gorgeously animated, gorgeously modeled characters, and they're going to emote all this great stuff, and it's going to be amazing. So that stuff has its value, but I think it's all about the context of the game you're building, and I think it's all about how are you going to substitute, like what are the trade-offs? Like I think for me, if you're going to take control of the player, you have to be bringing some value. And for me, when I look at like what Metal Gear, not to knock Metal Gear, but what Metal Gear has become, I think that it's not just about wrestling control, but it's also about a complete disregard for I think the player's time. And I think that when you're locking me in place for sometimes 30, 40 minutes just to stare at two characters chatting with each other and like basic repeating animations over and over again, that's kind of an FU to me. Like I can watch.
I see that.
Yeah, I can watch any show on TV and it's going to be better. No offense, but better performed and actually have real faces that I can resonate with and that whole thing. So I think if you can find what when you talk about summon spells in Final Fantasy, those aren't cutscenes obviously, but they are, but those aren't about expositing information. They're about shock and awe. They're about really putting on a fireworks show. So I think it's all about weighing all these pros and cons. But I tend to be kind of snobbish about cutscenes.
No,
is there any? Sorry, Pete. Is there any connection between that logic of snobbery towards, I guess, cutscenes and your decision during like perception? Like you have an option to have like chatty Cassie or like a more reduced talking version of the main character. Is that in any way related to that idea of like wanting to quiet down some of the exposition talking, that kind of thing?
That's a great question. I think that feature, actually, it's funny. I was just talking about someone had just mentioned that on either Twitter or a Steam page or something like that. Somebody just mentioned that like an hour or two ago. To me, that's actually a piece I learned from Ken Levine, the creative director at Irrational. And I always agreed with this, but he always thought to have different ways of experiencing the same title, the same encounters, the same experiences, really. And I think you have to look for opportunities to let players express themselves. And I think ultimately, you never know what the audience is going to value and how they're going to react to what you're creating. You have to create what you set out to say, like whatever it is you're trying to get across to the audience, whatever it is you have pent up inside of you that you're trying to get out to people. You have to tell that story. However, it is a game, and I think that there are always opportunities to let people just sort of remove any pain points and let people play it the way that they want to play. And to me, that feature in particular, the Silent Night mode, that came out of our very early reactions to our Kickstarter. A few weeks in, people are saying like, this is a horror. It wasn't really a horror game, considered a thriller. But the people are like, in horror games, the characters are usually silent except for cutscenes. Like, why is she talking so much? And it kind of took me back because we were very inspired by the characters from like the Joss Whedon TV shows like Buffy and that sort of thing. We have characters who deal with their own inner turmoil via little quips, via like little sort of bits of sarcasm and sort of writing it off. They're covering for their own weaknesses by putting strength and sarcasm out there, right? Mm-hmm. And I always love that kind of character. That sort of, Starbuck from Battlestar Galactica and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
That always fascinates me. But ultimately, people are like, oh, horror games, they don't talk. And I kind of leaned in a little bit and listened to people. And I thought about it a little bit. And it's like, listen, I've played every horror game out there. And like, you know what? You're right. Generally speaking, they don't talk at all. And I was like, okay, we've written all this stuff. And we know we want Cassie to be this way. However, it would be pretty easy for us during these sequences to be able to create a gate and basically say if people want to create or select a mode where she's going to be more quiet and not talk as much, we can just basically not play these particular lines. And it seems like such an easy win to let people play the way they want, and relatively low production cost. It's basically we have the lines and we just shut them out if we don't want her talking so much. And
yeah.
And anytime we can allow players to, it's really another way to express themselves. Say like, this is the way I want the experience to be. Now that can get out of hand. I think that particularly when you talk about PC gaming, like I think that PC gamers tend to be like, if there's any little thing you can imagine that you can't customize, they tend to lose it a little bit. And I get that. That's great. That's we should power to the players and that whole thing. But the way I see it is, if you can find low-hanging fruit to let people express themselves and experience the game the way that they want, you grab it. You go for that, right?
Yeah. And speaking of which, I want to ask you a question about how you got Perception off the ground. Yep. You went to Kickstarter and you had a successful run at it, and mm-hmm. I'm curious if you would do that again in today's climate.
Yeah, that that's a great question, and it's actually something we're looking at right now. So I had a great experience with it. I really did. It was a lot of stress, and it was way more work than I ever expected. And people tell me like, whatever you're expecting, you should double or triple it or even quadruple it. So it was a lot of work, and it was a lot of stress at the time. Amanda, who's the my wife and the the game's writer and producer.
Mm-hmm.
She was pregnant with our oh geez, hello. I don't even know. Your fourth.
Owen, right?
How many kids you got?
I got 4 kids. I don't know. I was pregnant with some kid. I don't know. Whatever.
Like Home Alone, you have to count them on the way out.
Yeah.
We miscount all the time. So it was a tremendous amount of stress, but we made some great connections, and basically every single convention we go to, we are connecting now, years later with people who supported us in the Kickstarter, people who are really close friends with. And so it was an amazing experience. And I would absolutely, like I said, we're considering it right now, because I think that you always have to have a variety of different plans. And, we have the game, we're starting to shop it around, and, we have a lot of nibbles, a lot of bites, that kind of thing. But these things can take a while. And in this climate, who the heck knows?
Yeah.
Now, the Kickstarter and the crowdfunding game has changed quite a bit in the years that have passed since then. And so I don't know how, like I said, we spent a lot of time looking into it recently. I don't know, like, really tangibly how it has changed in terms of like the likelihood of us making it. I'm really excited, because I think that part of me wants to just be like, let's just do it. Let's go, because like I said, it was such a great experience for me. But yeah, it's tough, man. Like, everything in the industry right now is so murky. I think that there's so much over the last 3 or 4 years. There's never been a time of more turmoil and just uncertainty. And it's not just about what's going on right now. I think it's that the industry has really split into so many different sects. I think that you have all these different interested groups and like partitions and bifurcation, and it's not just about the
business
platform
models, marketing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you've got free to play, you've got VR, you've got all these different things that are splitting the audiences, and it's great. I think it's awesome. You have all these different niches that are forming, and you have influencers and all that. Like it changes. Honestly, that the amount of change that happens in 2 or 3 months, I think, greatly overshadows by several orders of magnitude what used to happen over years in previous generations. Mm-hmm. Like, I think if you look at how quickly things are changing now, it's like an entirely different industry every 6 months. And that's awesome.
Sounds about right, because I remember months ago, they were talking about streaming services like they were the newest thing or whatever, and now it's like, it's just sort of like the normal thing to do is to get a streaming service for your games.
Yeah, well, like, it's funny because Pete knows about this. I don't know, a couple of years ago, year and a half or so ago, we were pitching another thing that was very much geared specifically towards all the different streaming platforms, because I thought that was the way the industry was going. Obviously, you have things like Game Pass and Stadia to a lesser extent, all these different things that are really, I think, hugely disruptive, both for good and for bad. But it does beg all these questions, like, where the hell are we going as an industry? The sort of erosion of well, you've got the erosion of physical gaming, you've got all these different things, and it's like, anyone who, again, once again, anyone who claims to know where things are heading or whatever, like, it's just like production. They're full of shit, because there's you might as well be predicting politics at this point, because it's just so much chaos. And I think that I think ultimately what matters is being able to be passionate about creating something, and being able to understand what it is you're trying to say, and then ideally knowing how to target the people who agree with you and who are going to be your audience, and really go out there and find the influencers, find the marketing, find the audience that's going to resonate with. And so that's where our focus is right now, is try, because we have a bit of a mishmash, the next thing we're doing. And I think when you hear about it, people are like, oh yeah, I get that. That's totally awesome. I'm all in. But you do have to make sure that you're finding the right people, because it's that's the problem with mishmash. It's very reminiscent of what I experienced in the early days of Bioshock when we were pitching it. I was on the road pitching Bioshock, was helping Ken. And so you talk about we get every rejection you can imagine. Every the sun was like, what are you talking about? You want to do an RPG and a shooter? Didn't Deus Ex do that like 5 years ago and it sucked? No, well, excuse me, didn't suck, but sales wise it wasn't. I love Deus Ex is one of my favorite games of all time, but yeah, it was relatively considered not that big a success, and so the idea of a game coming out and we're like, oh, you're gonna do that again, but you want to do it underwater? It's like, okay, what? And so yeah, it's tough to finding your audience is I think one of the most difficult pieces of creating a game.
Yeah, now it's like, you know, like what you were saying with them not wanting to take a risk. Then it's even worse now. You know,
yeah, absolutely, 100%.
Everybody wants to make the next sequel. Nobody wants to try new IPs. They leave that to the indie scene, and you know.
Yeah, and it's weird because you see this emerging space of, you know, the AAA or the double, call it, and you know, thankfully you have these companies like, you know, Epic Games who are coming in and like, you know, really revitalizing and reinventing what that space is and going out there and you know, I think that the industry, despite all the change, in a lot of ways has gotten a bit complacent, and I think Epic has come in. Not to sound like an Epic fanboy, I know that can be controversial with you know, the way people react about their storefront, but yeah, the way that they've come in and like the way that they both help developers out with all the funding and with royalty rates and all this sort of stuff, and it's really shaking stuff up. And I think if you look at what happens now with Steam, like all of a sudden they're like, oh yeah, we have all these new I love all these guys, but I think when it comes down to it, there was definitely a few gaps that I think things like Epic have started to really help out with, to help really, like I said, shake the space up and I think help a lot of smaller devs out. We have friends, you know, like you know, Gwen's company, right, Pete?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So I just like to see when things get shaken up. I like to see new players enter the space so we don't get stale, you know.
Yeah, totally.
Speaking of shaking things up, I have a question. I know I'd love to talk about your new idea, but I don't know anything about that, and I know you haven't revealed it yet.
Sure.
But in regards to perception, and especially since it was like the maiden voyage of your company, when did it change from just becoming or just being an idea to, okay, we're doing this, and how did that go down, and how did that feel for you?
You know, that's really funny because I think generally speaking, this is one of the trickiest pieces of a game creation, or really any kind of creation, is that if you look at the enormous mountain that you need to climb to create a game, when you get to the top and you release the game, and you're like, oh, there it is, and now we just gotta, you know, do some patches and support the community and that kind of thing, and we're like on top of the world. You start to make your way down and down the other side of the mountain, and you start to think about the next project, but somehow you always forget about that climb, that that seemingly insurmountable climb that you have ahead of you. And a lot of times it's like it's born out of this sort of naivete and this sort of I think yeah, I don't want to say, I think naivete is the right way to say it. I think that you often forget what it takes to get up there. And so you start to kick around all these ideas, and sometimes things just stick. And so in the case of perception, the initial idea just hit me in a prototyping class. I was finishing up after Irrational. I was finishing up my master's degree in basically human computer interaction. It was like a prototyping class. And you know, the professor at the end of class one night was like, oh, by the time you all get to your cars tonight, you're all going to think of the next brilliant idea, the next big thing. And I love that sort of challenge. And so I'm walking my way to my car. It's like a cold October night, and the lights in the parking lot are out. And I'm like walking along. We're like, okay, Amanda and I, we're always talking about horror games. We love horror. We love spooky thrillers. What would be a really cool concept? Like, well, okay, so, you know, information is the enemy of horror. That's something that we always said at Irrational. And so how can we remove some more information from the player? Well, it's like, well, okay, well, what if the player is blind? It's like, oh, what if the player was blind? And I was like, oh, echolocation. And it sort of spiraled. Then I got on the phone immediately, got in my car, called him in, and I was like, hey, what if there was a horror game where you played as a blind woman? And she was like, okay, why are you telling me this? I just put the kids to bed. I was like, no. Like, what if there was, and she was like, oh, okay, that'd be really cool. And so we started talking about it that night when I got home, and it just kind of spiraled. There's like, I listen, for me, especially, the worst thing you can do is start to list out all of the things that you need to do to make an idea reality. You talk about like, oh, we don't even have a company, so I need to incorporate. We have to build a website. We have to talk to a lawyer. We got to do the taxes and blah. And we got to provide a document and then pitch people and come up with a list for this, that. I would. There's no way I would ever function. And so really, what happened is like, we had that idea and. Like, honestly, I think for me, the biggest thing is about social pressure. The first thing I did the next day was I got on the phone with Jim Bonney, our audio director, who Pete knows.
Yep.
And I was like, dude, what if there was a game where you played as a blind woman and it was like really spooky and like you're exploring a mansion using echolocation? He's like, oh, that sounds awesome. And he started throwing some ideas and he's like, you should talk to them. And so I'm talking to all these people and I talked to Joe Fielder, who was a writer on Bioshock Infinite, and started to put together these pitches, and it's just kind of like spiraled, kind of snowballed. And before you know it, I was like, oh shit, I guess we got to pitch this thing, right? And so we started to put together pitches, and I talked to Leonie Menschenden, who's the marketing director at Irrational, and
is she
just
still
like
there?
one of those things. She went back to Ghost Story. Yes, for a while, she was doing a bit of a sort of an indie thing where she was working with indie developers to help with their marketing, but eventually Ken pulled her back in, which is great for her because she is like genuinely one of the most talented minds I think in the industry. She understands production, she understands marketing like no one else. She's just brilliant. She's very data driven. And, I was working with her for a little while on Perception. But anyway, so I think that's the biggest thing right there is some people, like, you can create deadlines, create like milestones for yourself. And like, if you can hold yourself accountable. But for me, I need to not like look at the giant list, and I need people to kind of pressure me and help me through things and that kind of thing. And so I tend to like to bring people in early to help me sort through stuff and divide and conquer, really.
So would you say then it was more like a steady, like one day at a time, kind of like we're going to get this next thing done rather than this light bulb, like we're doing this?
Well, the we're doing this thing really came as we started to be like, because I think we started off with again, very small goals. Like I got to talk to Jim. I got to come up with some ideas for the different time periods where this would take place. I got to talk about the different systems and what's the creature like. And we started to come up with enough that it was like, okay, there's enough here. Let's try and come up with a structure for this. Let's pitch it to a few people. And before we knew it, we were, I think, about 4 or so months of solid pre-production. And Amanda was like, you're going to be graduating from grad school soon. And you took the time off after Irrational. It's like, we really got to make a commitment. Are we going to actually do this thing? We've kind of flirted with it and it's been good. And I know you're focusing on school, but what are we going to do here? And I was like, okay, well, we can go to Kickstarter. We can talk about something like early access. There's all these different options. You're just like, okay, well, in 1 month, we're going to hit a Kickstarter. I was like, what? What are you talking about? I don't know how to hit a Kickstarter. It's like, well,
I see. That's how that went down.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I know. She's like, messing around for a while, and it's awesome, and I believe in this, and I'm behind it. But this is the deadline time, and she's like, okay, so in 1 month time, we're going to hit a Kickstarter. And I was like, I don't even know where to begin. She's like, well, figure it out.
Wow,
and
nice.
So, yeah, we did. We started, we actually reached out to Luke from Kickstarter, and we reached out to a bunch of people in the press, and we really started cranking up a demo, and I think again, it's about keeping people honest. It's about creating expectations and holding people accountable. Yeah. And for me, I needed that. And so in a month's time, we hit Kickstarter, and we had the kind of the cred that we needed, the kind of support and pressure that we needed. And so, yeah, it's just, I think that because listen, I'm sure you guys know how many before and be like, I'll get back to this at some point. Right. Like you
I'm sorry.
table it.
Can you ask that again? Because you cut out real like for a sec.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. So I was saying, like, have you guys ever? I'm sure you've started projects, big or small, and been like, I'll get back to this at some point, or I'll finish this at some point, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, I mean, P and I had a prototype going where we ended up saying, well, we need to come up with a schedule, right? So we scheduled everything out, and as soon as we did that, it became so overwhelming that we literally dropped it like a hot potato.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, no, I feel that, man. I think that's kind of what I'm saying there is that some people like to function that way, but yeah, that can be just nauseating, right? Just to look at all the things you have to do. But when you break it, when you like actually just focus on the small stuff and forget about all those details, as long as there's not like, oh, we have to have this entire thing done in 3 months, and so therefore we need to stick to this schedule to the T. Yeah. I think it all depends, you know.
I just want to point out how much passion that Bill has for games is very apparent from his profile picture, which is the picture of the cover of Wizards and Warriors 2, which had the illustrious Fabio posing.
Oh my God! Right? What a stud!
I freaking love that game.
It's a great game, right?
Yeah.
I always go back and forth between whether 1 or 2 better. I mean, 2 is like I think a lot more cartoony. I mean, they're both cartoony, but I feel like 1 had a little bit more of a, oh my God, this is so silly to talk about for NES games, but it had more of a sort of grittier feel, whereas 2 kind of went a little more cartoony.
Yeah. I understand. It felt. I honestly think it had a lot to do with the music and it had a lot to do with the fact that they used a lot of black in the first one.
Interesting. Yeah, and I'm totally going to play that in the next couple of days. Play them both.
Yeah, because I remember too having a lot of blues for like the backgrounds and stuff because of the sky.
Yeah, that's with the mountains and that sort of thing in it too.
Yeah,
wow. You blew my mind.
Oh, I pay attention to that stuff like ridiculous. It's
good.
Borderline
right?
insanity, man. I'd say.
Hey, Bill, I want to ask you one more thing before we let you go for the evening. But I want to talk about like some of you have this gamementary thing on YouTube, which is really great about Deep End and about the making of Perception.
Yeah,
it's really good, and there are a lot of things that you and your wife Amanda talk about is the stress of putting together that Kickstarter, that you're raising 4 kids, that you got dumped after irrational left.
Yeah, sure.
And you picked up all the pieces to then start your own game, and it's all summarized as well. That was really stressful. But what does that looks like, what that stress means, trying to raise the 4 kids, trying to do a game, trying to manage your time, and it's definitely a path you haven't walked before.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think a lot of this challenge has come back again with the pressure of getting some kind of deal or Kickstarter or getting the funding for the next thing that we're doing. While this pandemic is going on, I think we're all dealing with stress. But I think that it does make you question really everything. It really does make you question. Okay, well, this is my passion. I love making this. Making games, and this particular project is really, really special for me for so many reasons. But I think that in the past, when I would hear the pitter patter upstairs. Or the screaming upstairs or whatever it may be, it was the kind of thing where a lot of times Amanda and I would tag team. It would be like, okay, I'm upstairs, now she's downstairs, and that kind of thing. But I think now that there's this weird pressure and this weird obligation that it's like any parent would feel, but things are really sensitive right now, and I think that it's a very unique challenge. And I think that coming from that was absolutely the most stressful time of my life. This is very different, where it's weird because you have this what seems like all the time in the world, right? But you have all of this growing pressure, and like, am I doing a good enough job right now? Right? I think we're all feeling that. And I think with the kids in particular, it's like there are all of these things. You talk about listing out all these features that we want to do for the game. We listed out. We have a whiteboard. We painted in our kitchen one of the walls this whiteboard paint. We got it at like Home Depot or whatever, and it allows us to write with white markers or whatever, awesome. Whiteboard markers. Yeah, it's great. It's this huge wall. And at the very start of this thing, early March, we started to list out all the things that we wanted the kids to learn, and the things that we sat down with them like, hey, what kind of things do you want to tackle? And we're talking about programming and photography and baking and all these things, and we chipped away at it. But I think before it was a lot more pressing, where I was like, oh my goodness, there's literally a baby screaming right now, and they need us right now, versus this weird psychological thing right now, which is, oh my God, are my kids being taken care of enough? Are they learning enough? Are they, enriched enough? All this sort of stuff, which is, listen, really blessed to be able to even talk like that at this point, like to be, and so it feels so weird to, and this is the furthest thing from a complaint, but I think a lot of times life, you kind of have these battles that continue to fight over and over again. And for me, I think a lot of it is about balance. I think it's always been about trying to find that happy spot where it's like, I love film and I love so many things that I love. And it's like really trying to figure out how to focus that energy. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's the biggest thing. It's about really trying to find ways to focus yourself, to focus your mental bandwidth, to focus your time, to focus your emotions, all that kind of thing. And so with the Kickstarter, that was, I think, the biggest lesson there is I think that Amanda and I, we both learned, and we're always improving, but we learned how to make the most of the precious time we have, whether it's working on a game or working with the kids, or I think a lot of it is about really looking at things holistically. She really spearheaded a movement where it's about taking time for yourself, and there's all this talk about self-care and this kind of thing, but it's really about, again, focus. And it's about, I don't really meditate, but I do at the very least take time to step back and take stuff in and figure out what am I trying to do and what's important, and really being mindful more than anything else.
Yeah, I sat in one of her seminars.
Cool.
And she said one of the greatest things that she said was like, if you're in a creative block, go take a shower, and goddamn it, it's totally true. It's totally true.
Yeah.
She said it's like scientifically proven or something.
Well, absolutely. Like the stuff that we could talk about in terms of the different techniques, and that's why, again, I think when people talk about, I've got it figured out. You don't. There are so many different ways to approach it. If there's something that's working for you right now, awesome. That's probably going to change. At some point, you're going to hit a wall, you're going to plateau, you're going to, atrophy, whatever it is. You're not going to function the same way that you always have, just based on the fact that your mind is changing, your body is always changing, and this sort of thing. And so the specific needs of the moment are going to change. And so for me, like one of the things I used to do with Ken when we get kind of roadblocks, come out with concepts for Infinite, working through whatever kind of issue, narrative or production or hiring. Sometimes it sounds really silly, but we'd go out for a walk. We'd walk through downtown Quincy, which is it's kind of funny, but there's all kinds of studies about the way that when you get moving, what kind of things foster creativity. Yeah. It's not sitting at your desk. It's not sitting there and pounding your head against the keyboard. That's not going to help. It's going to make things worse. Things
I got to remember that myself.
You find yourself at the computer for a long time?
All the time. All the time.
You have to force yourself to listen. So, and again, I'm making a generality here. Maybe that works for you. So I know some people who sit down for 12 hours and just crank. And if that works, great. But you always have to be in this state of constantly questioning, is this working? Can I do better? Where can I improve? What's hindering me? You have to always be mindful of these things to be able to take a step back. And so, Amanda, for example, little things that made a profound difference things like diet. Like we talk about, like, and this is meant to be like this ramble about diet, because I eat a lot of junk too. But like we in Crunch and Bioshock, I mean, she talks about in that documentary, we got really, really sick. And a lot of it was just we weren't going through the same routine of that crunch, but then also what we were eating, and just like it was terrible for us. And we started to make these small changes that had profound impacts on our day to day, and just like this fog that we had in our brains just started to lift. And you don't realize it as you're going through it, but you think back on it, it's like, oh my God, like 3 weeks ago, I couldn't even form a cogent sentence.
As a programmer, I can definitely relate to that. For me, it's a whiteboard. Like, I could do anything that I want on my computer. I could type things out. I could map things out. I can draw diagrams. But for some reason, it's getting up out of this chair and going to a whiteboard. I come up with the solution immediately.
That's awesome. That's great that you know that. I mean, there's so many things that contribute and hinder, or either help or hinder, our progress creatively and coming to solutions and that sort of thing. Like, are you familiar with the doorway effect? I think it's called the doorway effect.
No.
But so one of the things that I think people so you ever walk into a meeting, you're walking down the hall and you chat with people, and then you walk into the meeting room and immediately like, oh shit, what was I going to say? Or you come into a room and you're like, wait, what did I come into this room for?
Yeah.
Well, there's a psychological effect, well researched, that when you walk through doorways, there's something about that transition that makes your brain like click and turn into, so like, oh, it makes you change gears. And so a lot of times you forget what you were doing. And so if you think about how that may affect, if you walk through a doorway and you're like, oh shit, I forgot what I was coming here to do. Well, how do you think that it hampers your creativity or your problem solving? And so all these things that you need to be mindful of that are going to affect you. And some people, it's just like, it's not going to make a difference at all. But all of these little things do have sometimes a profound impact. And I think it's important to be able to take a step back and look at everything that you're doing and be able to say, am I slouching too much in my chair? Am I not eating right? Do I stop breathing? That sounds silly, but do I stop breathing when I'm sitting and coding for a while? Sometimes if you just take a step back and take like 10 seconds to just breathe, that can have a huge impact. Get some fresh air, take a walk, whatever it is. These things are I think, critical. And I think, especially when you add them all up.
It goes hand in hand with animation too. Like
cool.
we crank at like hours at our desks.
Cool.
And do you think Amanda would be willing to? Does she do podcasts?
Oh my goodness, would she ever? She'd love to. I mean, this is what she's super passionate about, and she's like,
great.
I'm like a complete idiot when it comes to this sort of thing, but she is, she teaches yoga. She speaks nationwide about all of these different tactics and this sort of. So she would love to, and I'm sure she'd be able to tell you. You would walk out, because she's changed my life, obviously, but like I think you talk about development, the impact that she's had on me. After when we started working together about 3 or 4 years ago, but I had been developing games for about 12, 13 years, and you fall into these rhythms and you don't realize it. And then she's like, well, why do you do that? Why do you do that? And yeah, she'd like, I'll talk to her. I'll set that up.
Awesome. Sure. Thank you so much. That'd be fantastic.
Of course.
Bill, this has been great. There's so much more to mine from you. Sounds like you've got a lot of experience and a lot of stories to tell.
Yeah, thank you.
Stories I could tell.
Thank you so much, dude, for coming on. Like,
no, of
seriously.
course, it's great. Sorry, tend to be ranty, but
no, it's all great. It's all good stuff.
And good luck with the game. I mean, I don't know exactly when you're going to reveal it, especially given the circumstance of around everything right now. But definitely wish you the very best of luck.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, man. And so thanks again, Jeff. You want to take us out?
If anybody wants to, again, I'm going to plug that Gamumentary because I found it to be really helpful in understanding your career path and the game of perception. And that way, I think it does motivate you to want to pick that up as well. So you can just do a Google search for Gamumentary, probably just Bill Gardner on top of that, and you'll find it pretty easily. And and pick up Perception as well.
Yeah,
but I just want to say again, Bioshock Infinite changed my life. I love those games. So again, thank you for joining us. This has been Just a Few More Minutes podcast. Thanks, Jeffro, for joining us again.
No problem. My pleasure.
All right, Pete, always good to talk with you, and we will see you on the next episode. See you guys.
All right.